There's a trick sitting in almost every kitchen in America, and most folks have never once tried it. Not because it's hard, but because nobody ever showed them. It costs nothing but tap water. It takes maybe 30 seconds of your time, and it turns food scraps most people scrape straight into the trash can into living, growing plants. 10 plants, 1 cup of water each, no soil, no yard, no raised beds, and no gardening experience required. Wait till we get to number 4. Most people grow this plant for looks and never once taste the best part of it. The leaves are edible, and they carry more nutrition than most folks ever guess. Number 2, roots in about a week, and it's one of the easiest living things you could try to keep alive, even if you've managed to kill every houseplant you've ever owned. Number 8 isn't a plant you'd expect on a list like this at all. Most people chop it, cook it, and throw the best part straight in the compost without knowing what they had. I've spent most of my life around plants, first inside a hospital, and these days, out here in a garden. Over 20 years as a registered nurse taught me one thing about people, plain and simple. We forget the easy stuff. We reach for the supplement bottle on the shelf. We skip right past the scraps sitting on the cutting board in front of us. Every single plant on this list, I've grown myself, right on my own kitchen counter, with nothing fancier than an old jam jar. Some of these root in days. Some take weeks. Every one of them, without exception, grows from something you already own. I'll walk you through each one the same way I learned them, by doing it wrong first, and then right. Let's start with the one most people already have sitting in their refrigerator drawer right now, with no idea it can do this. Basil. Most people buy a little clamshell of it, use what they need, and watch the rest go limp in the refrigerator by the end of the week. This one traveled a long road to your windowsill. Its roots trace back to India and Southeast Asia, thousands of years before it ever saw an Italian kitchen. Snip a 4-inch piece, cutting just below a leaf node, that little bump where a leaf meets the stem. Drop the stem in a glass of water, leaves up above the waterline. That's the whole trick. Cutting below the node matters more than folks realize. That spot is where the plant's own growth signals concentrate, the place it's most ready to send out roots instead of more leaves. Roots show up in about a week, little white threads, reaching down like they're searching for something to hold on to. The smell of basil does more than sit nice in a kitchen. Folks have chewed the leaf or steeped it into a tea after a heavy meal for generations to help settle the stomach down some. That's tradition talking, not a prescription. USDA data puts a cup of fresh basil leaves as a good source of vitamin K, the kind your body relies on for normal blood clotting, along with a modest amount of vitamin A and manganese besides. A little perspective. A small store-bought clamshell of basil runs a few dollars and wilts inside a week. One rooted jar on your counter gives you fresh leaves for months for the cost of a single cutting. There's more than one kind of basil worth knowing about too. Sweet basil's the common one, but Thai basil and lemon basil root exactly the same easy way if you ever want to branch out. Old garden wisdom pairs basil right alongside tomato plants, said to help keep certain pests away and even improve the tomato's flavor. I can't promise you the science on that one, but generations of gardeners have sworn by it. Pesto, if you're curious, comes out of Genoa on the Italian coast, where cooks were grinding basil with oil and nuts long before it ever showed up jarred on a grocery shelf. I keep 3 jars of basil going on my counter at any given time. Well, 4, if you count the one I forget about till it's gone leggy. Basil wants bright, indirect light. Too little, and the stem goes thin and stretches toward the window. Too much harsh, direct sun, and the leaf edges can scorch right up. Once the roots hit about an inch long, you've got a choice. Pot it in soil, or just keep it right there in the water, snipping leaves as you need them. Basil's forgiving. Simple. Nearly impossible to ruin if you remember to change the water now and again. There's something almost like a small grace in it, watching a stem you'd have thrown in the compost turn into something you can eat off of for months. I don't take that lightly. Basil's the easiest herb most people haven't tried rooting yet. The next one on the list, you'll wonder why you ever bought it at the store at all. Mint. If basil's forgiving, mint is downright reckless. It roots in water faster than nearly anything else you own. There's a reason mint shows up in nearly every culture's kitchen somewhere along the way. It grows so easily that people have been passing cuttings hand to hand for centuries instead of buying seed. The genus goes by mentha, and there's dozens of varieties under that name. Peppermint, spearmint, chocolate mint, apple mint. Nearly all of them root the exact same easy way. Cut a piece with a few leaf sets, strip the bottom leaves off so they're not sitting underwater, and set it in a glass. Change the water every few days, and that's the entire job. Use a clear jar if you can find one. Half the fun is watching those roots come in day by day, right there where you can see them. The cooling feeling mint leaves on your tongue, that's the menthol in it, and folks have leaned on it for ages to help settle an upset stomach after eating. Like cracking a window when a room's gone stuffy. In parts of the Middle East, mint tea's practically a form of hospitality. The kettle goes on the moment a guest walks through the door. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. Plant mint straight in your garden bed, and it will take over every square foot it can reach, roots running sideways under the soil where you can't even see them coming. Growing it in a jar solves that problem entirely. Contained, controlled, and you can move it wherever the light's best. No digging required to keep it in line. Roots on mint show up faster than on basil, sometimes inside 4 or 5 days. You'll see them before you've even had time to forget you started the cutting. Pinch the very top of the stem once it's growing well, and the plant branches out wider instead of running up into one long, leggy stalk. Peppermint carries more of that sharp, cooling menthol. Spearmint's gentler, a little sweeter. Neither one is better. It just depends what you're after in a cup of tea. If your jar gets ahead of you, hang the extra sprigs upside down somewhere dry and dark for a couple weeks. Dried mint keeps for tea all through the winter, long after fresh leaves would have gone limp. In British kitchens, mint's paired with roast lamb about as often as basil's paired with tomato here, chopped fine into a sharp vinegary sauce that's been served that way for generations. If you ever do move a mint jar into a pot, keep that pot on its own, away from other plants sharing the same soil. Even contained, mint has a way of finding room it wasn't invited into. I've got a jar going by my kitchen sink right this minute. Tore a few leaves into my tea not 20 minutes before I started filming this. Mint root's so easy, it almost feels like cheating. The next one on the list takes a little more patience, but it earns it. Rosemary. Shakespeare gave this one a line in Hamlet. Rosemary for remembrance. Folks have tied this plant to memory for centuries, long before anybody studied it in a lab. The name itself comes from an old Latin phrase, rosmarinus, dew of the sea. It grows wild along rocky Mediterranean hillsides in thin, dry soil and full sun, the kind of conditions most plants wouldn't tolerate for a week. It's been burned as incense in old temples, woven into wedding wreaths and tucked into funeral bouquets, always tied back to that same idea, remembrance and loyalty. This one's trickier than basil or mint. Take a 6-inch cutting from a stem that hasn't gone woody yet, strip the bottom 2 inches of needles, and set it in water, out of direct sun. Rosemary roots slow. We're talking 3 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. Patience. Some gardeners scrape a thin sliver of bark off near the cut end before setting it in water. Wounding, they call it. It seems to coax a stubborn cutting into rooting a bit faster. Change the water every few days so it doesn't turn cloudy, and don't be surprised if half your cuttings just don't take. That's ordinary for this one, not a sign you've done anything wrong. If a needle or two goes yellow near the bottom, pinch it off. That stem was never going to root, and there's no use putting more hope into it than it's got left to give. I lost my first 4 rosemary cuttings before one finally rooted. Stubborn plant. Worth it, though, once it takes hold. Fresh rosemary tends to run pricier than most herbs at the store, ounce for ounce, since it's slow-growing commercially, too. A rooted cutting saves you that markup for years to come. There's an old bit of folklore that says rosemary only thrives in a home where the woman rules the household. I can't speak to the truth of that, but I will say, mine grows just fine. Cooks have long tucked rosemary into marinades for heavier cuts of meat, the strong aromatic oils said to cut through some of that gamey taste. Old kitchen wisdom, well before anyone wrote a cookbook explaining why. Once it's established, rosemary is remarkably drought-tolerant, needing far less water than most people assume. Overwatering, in fact, kills more rosemary plants than neglect ever does. A well-established rosemary bush can live for decades, woody and thick at the base, long outliving nearly every other herb you might have started alongside it. Once it's rooted, rosemary wants soil on the drier side, gritty if you've got it, and plenty of sun. Nothing like the damp, shaded spot that suits mint or basil so well. If rosemary teaches patience, the next plant on this list teaches the opposite lesson entirely. Sage. For generations, people have brewed this into a strong tea and gargled it for a scratchy throat. The Latin name, salvia, comes from an old word meaning to heal or to save. That tells you something about how central this plant used to be to an old-world medicine cabinet. Cuttings root about as slow and stubborn as rosemary. Same method. Strip the lower leaves, set the stem in water, and keep it out of harsh, direct sun. Only take your cutting from a stem that hasn't flowered yet. Once a stem's gone to flower, it's put its energy elsewhere, and it rarely bothers rooting. Rooting can take 4 to 6 weeks, and a slightly cooler spot in the house, out of a warm draft, seems to suit it better than a hot windowsill. Sage carries a strong, almost peppery smell when you crush a leaf between your fingers. That's the plant's own oils doing their work, the same oils that made it a favorite for flavoring heavy, fatty foods for centuries. European kitchens have long paired sage with sausage, pork, and rich, buttery dishes, the kind of food old cooks believed needed a little help getting digested properly. A sage gargle, cooled and strained, has been a fairly standard home remedy for a scratchy throat across a lot of old kitchens, long before lozenges ever showed up at a pharmacy counter. There's an old story, repeated often enough to take with a grain of salt, that Dutch traders once handed over several chests of Chinese tea for a single chest of dried sage. I can't verify the ledger, but it tells you how seriously people once took this plant. Worth saying plainly, this is common garden sage, the culinary kind. It's a different plant entirely from white sage, which carries its own separate cultural and ceremonial history I won't speak over here. I'll say this plainly, because it matters. Sage contains compounds that, in concentrated amounts, aren't something you'd want to rely on long-term without talking to your doctor first, especially if you're pregnant or nursing. A leaf in your tea now and then is one thing. A concentrated extract is another conversation entirely, and that conversation belongs with your physician. There's a patch of sage by my back step that's been there longer than some of my grandchildren. Silver green, all year round, rain or shine. Once it roots, sage likes it dry. Don't keep it swimming in water once those roots show up. Get it into soil with good drainage, or the roots can rot before the plant ever gets going. A healthy sage bush, once it's established, can live for years, right where you planted it. Unlike a lot of kitchen herbs that need replacing every season, sage takes its time. The next one on the list, you'll have new growth within days. Thyme. Tiny leaves. Enormous history. This plant's been steeped, burned, and rubbed into wounds by cultures that never once spoke to each other, going back thousands of years. The ancient Greeks burned it as incense in their temples and added it to bathwater. The word thyme itself likely comes from the Greek thumos, meaning to fumigate, which tells you something about how they used it. There's dozens of varieties out there. Common culinary thyme, lemon thyme, creeping thyme, underfoot in a garden path. Nearly all of them propagate the exact same easy way. Same rooting method as rosemary and sage. Stem cutting, strip leaves at the base, patience in a jar of water, out of direct sun. It's slow, similar to rosemary, sometimes a full month before you see real roots. And once it's potted, it needs sharp drainage. Sitting wet is the fastest way to lose a thyme plant. Thymol, the compound that gives thyme its sharp smell, has traditionally been used against certain bacteria and fungi. Historically documented, mind you, not a replacement for anything your doctors prescribed you. Before refrigeration existed, cooks packed sprigs of thyme right in with meat and cheese, leaning on those same strong oils to help keep spoilage at bay a little longer. A single thyme plant, once it's established, can be harvested from for years without ever needing to be replaced, which is more than you can say for most annual kitchen herbs. Bees adore thyme flowers, and beekeepers in some parts of the world have valued the resulting honey for its distinct, almost herbal flavor for as long as anyone's kept records of it. Thyme's one of the backbone herbs in that classic French blend, Herbe de Provence, alongside rosemary, sage, and lavender, all of them growing wild together across those same sunny hillsides. Creeping thyme, the low ground cover variety, Roots the same easy way as the upright culinary kind, though most folks grow it for pathways rather than the kitchen. That sharp smell is strongest right after you crush a leaf. Rub one between your fingers sometime and you'll understand why folks reached for this plant before they ever reached for a bottle from a pharmacy shelf. Funny thing about thyme, it actually does better a little neglected. Rich soil and too much water make it leggy and weak smelling. It wants to struggle some. I use it mostly in the kitchen, if I'm honest. Roast chicken, potatoes, a pot of beans. The rest is just a bonus. One thing worth knowing, dried thyme is actually more concentrated than fresh, so when a recipe calls for a tablespoon of fresh, a teaspoon of dried will do the same work. We're leaving the herb garden for the vegetable drawer next, because this one, most people already have sitting in their refrigerator. Green onions, the easiest plant on this entire list, and probably the one you're most likely to have on hand right this minute. Onions and their close relatives are among the oldest cultivated plants we've got any record of, grown across Asia and the Middle East for thousands of years before anyone wrote a word about them. Don't throw out the white root end after you chop the green tops for cooking. Set that root end in a shallow glass of water. Cut side up. A small glass works fine here, tall enough to keep the roots submerged, but shallow enough that the green tops stay dry and standing upright above the rim. Within 3 or 4 days, new green shoots push up right from the center. Keep harvesting the tops, and that same root end just keeps producing, over and over. Green onions belong to the same plant family as garlic, and they carry some of the same sulfur compounds folks have leaned on for generations to support the immune system. Traditionally, that is. Not a substitute for a flu shot or your doctor's advice. After 2 or 3 rounds of regrowth in water alone, the shoots tend to get thinner and paler. Move that root end into soil at that point, and it comes back stronger. This same trick works with leeks too, if you can find one with the root end still intact. Same method, same shallow glass, same quick results. Chives are a cousin of the same family, though they're better started from division at the roots rather than water, if you ever want to add them to this same windowsill collection. Scallions show up chopped fine into pancakes across Chinese kitchens, folded into dumplings, scattered raw over just about anything savory. Hard to find a cuisine that hasn't found a use for this plant somewhere. Regrown scallion tops taste every bit as sharp as the original bunch. It's really only the growth rate that slows a little with each round, not the flavor. Keep 2 or 3 root ends going at once, staggered a few days apart, and you'll never actually run out. One jar, always a step ahead of the one you're currently harvesting from. A single bunch of scallions from the store costs about the same as a cup of coffee. Regrow the roots even once, and you've effectively gotten a second bunch for free. I've had the same scallion going in a jar on my counter for going on 2 months now, longer than some houseplants I've owned, if I'm being honest. The water does start to smell a little sulfury after a while, the way any allium does. Change it every 2 or 3 days, and it stays manageable. That's just what the plant is. If scallions are the easiest, the next one might just be the most satisfying to watch. Celery. Most people cut off the base, the heart of the bunch, and toss it straight in the trash without a second thought. This plant started out bitter and wild, growing in marshy ground around the Mediterranean. It took centuries of careful selective growing to breed it into the mild, crunchy stalks we know today. Save that base, set it in a shallow dish of water, cut side up, just enough to cover the bottom half-inch or so. Worth a note, celery sold with the leaves still attached on top tends to regrow more vigorously than the trim kind, since those leaves signal the crown is still active. If you've got a choice at the store, pick the leafy bunch. Use a wide, shallow dish rather than a tall glass here. The new growth comes right up out of the crown at the center, not from long roots reaching down like you'd see on a mint or basil cutting. Change that water daily if you can manage it. The cut base can turn slimy faster than a stem cutting does, and fresh water keeps it from souring. Within a week, you'll see new pale leaves pushing up from the center. It won't grow you a full new bunch, but it'll give you fresh stalks and leaves for weeks. Celery's mostly water, better than 90% of it by weight, which is part of why it's stayed a favorite for a light, hydrating snack for as long as people have grown it. Cheap, simple, and it works in a dish you probably already own. A whole new bunch at the store runs several dollars. A regrown base gives you a few weeks of fresh stalks and leaves for something you'd have thrown away anyhow. The little leaves you get back this way have a stronger, almost peppery flavor compared to the stalks themselves. Good chopped fine over soup or worked into a broth. I save my tougher outer stalks, the ones nobody wants to eat raw, and freeze them right alongside carrot and onion ends for the next time I've got a stock pot going. Celery, onion, and carrot together make up what French kitchens call mirepoix, the flavor base under half the soups and sauces you've ever eaten, whether you knew that name for it or not. A regrown celery base won't get you a full stock count for that kind of cooking, but paired with a store-bought bunch, it stretches what you've got just a little further, week after week. After a couple weeks in water, transplant that base into soil if you want it to keep going longer. Otherwise, just enjoy what the water alone gives you. My grandkids think this one's magic. I haven't corrected them yet. Celery gives you stalks. The next one on the list gives you something a little more colorful and a lot more useful in the kitchen. Sweet potato. Stick a handful of toothpicks around the middle of one, suspend it half in a jar of water, and just wait. This one traveled a long way too, originally out of Central and South America, moving around the globe centuries before its cousin, the regular potato, ever did. Not every grocery store sweet potato will sprout. Some get treated with a sprout inhibitor to keep them from doing exactly this on the shelf. If nothing's happened after 3 weeks, try a different one, ideally organic. In a couple weeks, roots grow down into the water and vines grow up and out. It gets big. Give it room. Here's what most people miss. This isn't just a houseplant, it's dinner too. The leaves are edible, and they're a genuinely good source of vitamin A, cooked the same way you'd cook spinach. The vitamin A there comes in the form of beta-carotene, the same pigment that makes carrots orange. Your body converts it as needed, and cooked leaves have it in meaningful amounts. In parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, the leaves have been a regular vegetable on the table for generations, while here, we mostly just grow the vine for looks and never touch a leaf. Once your vine gets long, you can snip off a piece with a few leaves attached and root that piece in its own jar. One sweet potato, and suddenly you've got 2 plants going. Some folks let a vine trail all winter just for the greenery, never once picking a leaf to eat. Nothing wrong with that, but you'd be leaving good food on the table, so to speak. The flowers, if you ever get one, look almost exactly like a morning glory, which makes sense, since the 2 plants are close relatives. Same trumpet shape, same soft purple-pink color. Nurseries sell this exact vine purely as an ornamental in solid black or lime green varieties, and most folks buying it for a hanging basket never once realize the plant is edible at all. This vine is about as forgiving as anything on this whole list. Forget to top off the jar for a few days, and it'll barely notice, still pushing out new leaves regardless. A single $2 sweet potato can produce a vine that keeps you in fresh greens for the better part of a season, longer than a bagged salad mix from the store ever could. I've got a sweet potato vine that's taken over half my kitchen window at this point. My husband keeps threatening to trim it. I keep talking him out of it. Sweet potato gives you a vine that just won't quit. The next plant on the list works a little differently, root end and all. Ginger. This one's a little different because you're not rooting a cutting. You're waking up a piece that's already been sitting dormant. Ginger's been traded along spice routes for well over 2,000 years, moving out of Southeast Asia, across the Middle East, and eventually into every European kitchen that could afford it. Take a piece with a few of those little bumps, the eyes, and set it in a shallow dish of water so the bottom's just covered. Choose a piece that's plump and firm, not shriveled, and make sure you can actually see an eye or two before you start. Change the water every couple days. In a week or two, you'll see small roots, and eventually a little green shoot pushing up from one of the eyes. Grocery store ginger is sometimes treated to keep it from sprouting on the shelf. If yours sits for weeks without a single sign of life, that may be the reason, and it's worth trying an organic piece instead. Ginger's been used traditionally to settle an upset stomach for about as long as people have been writing things down. Warming, folks used to call it, like a blanket for your insides. Beyond tea, ginger's been added to broths and stews for centuries, especially in cold, damp weather, valued specifically for that warming quality folks always associated with it. Once it's growing well in soil, ginger takes its sweet time, often the better part of a year before you've got a harvestable root worth digging up. Slow, but not much asked of you along the way. Beyond tea and broth, folks have candied ginger for centuries too, simmering it down in sugar syrup until it's chewy and warm on the tongue. A treat as much as a tradition. Homemade ginger beer's another old tradition, brewed slow with fresh root, sugar, and thyme, long before anything with that name showed up bottled at a grocery store. A single knob from a grocery store, started this way, can keep a household in fresh ginger for the better part of a year, root ends saved right back into a new dish each time. Cut what you need from the outer edge of the rhizome, leave the rest in the soil, and it just keeps growing. I'll say this plainly, because it matters. Ginger can interact with blood thinners, and it isn't the right choice for everybody, especially if you've got gallstones or you're on certain medications. A little in your tea is one thing. Anything beyond that belongs in a conversation with your doctor, not a video. I want to say it was my grandmother who first showed me this trick with ginger. Or maybe it was her sister. Goodness, it's been so many years, I honestly couldn't tell you for certain anymore. Either way, it stuck. Once that shoots up a couple inches, move the whole piece into soil. Water alone will only carry it so far. Ginger takes the longest of anything on this list to really get going. The last one takes almost no time at all. Romaine lettuce. Save the base after you use the leaves, the same way you would with celery, and set it in a shallow dish of water. Lettuce has been grown for thousands of years, with records of it in ancient Egyptian gardens long before it ever became the salad staple it is now. Use a wide, shallow dish, just enough water to touch the cut base. Too much standing water can rot the crown before new leaves ever get the chance to form. Within a few days, new little leaves start pushing up from the center. It's small, but it's real growth. And it's free. It won't give you a full head again. Water alone can't manage that. Once it's been cut, the plant naturally wants to bolt, to send up a flower stalk, rather than keep making leaves indefinitely. But you'll get enough fresh leaves for a garnish or a small salad over a couple weeks, which is a good deal better than throwing that base straight in the trash. If you'd rather stretch it longer, once you see a couple new leaves, move the base into a pot of soil. It won't turn back into a full head, but it'll keep producing a bit longer than water alone allows. The darker outer leaves on any head of lettuce generally carry more of those nutrients than the pale, tightly wrapped leaves near the center. Worth remembering next time you're tempted to toss the outer layer. Funny thing, both Greeks and Romans sometimes ate their lettuce braised or cooked in broth rather than raw. The cold, crisp salad we picture today was a much later habit, and not the only way this plant's been served. Butter lettuce and green leaf lettuce regrow from a saved base the same way romaine does. If you've got a favorite variety, there's a good chance this trick works on it too. Those leaves carry folate and vitamin K, the same nutrients you'd get from the store-bought head, just in a smaller amount, and for the cost of nothing at all. Think of this one as a way to stretch a head of lettuce a little further, not as a way to avoid ever buying one again. Same trick works with the base of a head of bok choy or a whole cabbage core, if you want to try it beyond just romaine. It's a small thing, watching a scrap you were about to throw away turn back into food. I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. Harvest those leaves when they're a few inches long, right at the base. They keep in the refrigerator like any fresh lettuce. Just rinse and dry them before you use them. 10 plants, 1 cup or 1 dish of water each, and every single one of them started as something most people throw straight in the trash. Now, I'll say the same thing I always say. None of this replaces a trip to your doctor, and none of it replaces real food from a real garden or a real grocery store. What it does is give you a way to stretch what you've already got, and maybe teach a grandkid something along the way. I've been a nurse. I'm a gardener now. And after both, I can tell you, some of the best medicine is the kind that costs a cup of water and a little bit of patience. If you try even 3 or 4 of these, you'll cut down on trips to the store, and you'll have something green and living on your counter besides. Small changes, most days, add up to more than folks expect. Save this one if you think you'll want to come back to it. There's a lot to try here, and nobody expects you to start all 10 in a single afternoon. Pick just one to start with tonight. The rest will still be here waiting whenever you're ready for them. There's something almost like a small grace in it, watching new growth come up from a scrap you'd nearly thrown in the trash. I think of it as a bit of a blessing from the soil, a reminder we're given more to work with than we usually notice. Stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next one. If you found this useful, stick around, subscribe, and I'll keep sharing what over 20 years between a hospital and a garden has taught me. Which one of these 10 are you trying first? Tell me down in the comments. I read everyone.